Hola, gracias por estar aquí. Mi nombre es Zooko, my name is Zooko, and the clicker's not working as far as I know. Is it working?
There we go.
It doesn't matter, I don't need my slides. It's not working.
It's not working.
So, I'm going to talk about Zcash, and I kind of do need my slides to remember what I was going to say.
We'll do them manually.
Okay. Next.
This is your clicker now.
I'll just click this button over here. Ready? Can I hit the next arrow? Oh, good. All right, so I was born in 1974, and that was a different world. Also, things that happened in that year: Juan Perón died, Mao Zedong was dying, and Ralph Merkle invented public key cryptography that year. Yeah, can I borrow your laptop? Thank you. And things that happen when you're, young change you, inform you. And two things that had a big effect on me was when I was 15 years old, and all of a sudden the Berlin Wall fell. Before that, I grew up in the Cold War. Like, I was taught to live in fear of nuclear annihilation and things like that. And then, much to my surprise, this wall that had been trapping people, this barrier, tumbled down. And people became more free and more able to prosper. And the next thing that happened that had a big effect on me was I discovered the internet. The internet was amazing. It was a really exciting time. And it seemed to me that the internet was eradicating even more walls. Because before the internet, you didn't really talk to people, at least people in the United States didn't really talk to people from other countries, right? National borders were communication barriers. And it seemed like this new technology could enable all kinds of improvements for everyone by facilitating free communication among all the people. And it did. It's been like 25 years or so, and the internet has totally improved life in so many ways for everyone. Health and education and science and business and government and everything has been improved in one way or another by the internet, I would say. And then the next thing that happened for me was I discovered the papers of David Chaum, who was one of the great cryptographers, along with Ralph Merkle and Ron Rivest and others, who bravely wrested the science of cryptography away from the military in the late 70s and the 1980s. And Chaum also invented most of the cryptography that is still the basis of privacy on the internet, including the basis of private money. And as soon as I learned about that, I couldn't think of anything else. You know, when you first learn about Bitcoin, and then at some point it starts to sink in, and then you fall into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and you can't think about anything else except Bitcoin? Well, that happened to me with David Chaum's cryptography in 1993. I couldn't think about anything else but privacy-preserving digital money. And the first thing I did was started trying to envision how you could make it decentralized, because Chaum invented private digital cash, but it was centralized private digital cash. So I immediately started trying to figure out how to make it decentralized, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I went to work. I dropped out of college because I couldn't think about anything except digital cash, and so I went to work for David Chaum, and that was a really great decision that improved my life because I was the dumbest person in the room. So I learned so much from the cryptographers who worked there, and that started my career where I've had the privilege of working on things that I care about for almost all of my jobs ever since. And all along the way, I was trying to think of how to invent decentralized money, and I remember talking to David Chaum about it and coming up with ideas for how to invent decentralized money, ideas that didn't work. And then there was this long period when I got more and more lonely. Like, the CEO of a big internet company from Silicon Valley said, "Privacy is dead, get over it." And more people in Silicon Valley seemed to think that privacy was passé and unimportant. And I never agreed, but I felt like I was the last person who cared until Bitcoin came along. This was a thing of beauty. This was the thing that I had struggled to come up with for so long. Oh, I didn't start my timer, so I'm going to rely on you to tell me when to stop. And I couldn't come up with it for like more than a decade. I couldn't figure out how to make it work, and so I had started thinking it was impossible to have decentralized money. And then Bitcoin came out of nowhere. And so I'm eternally grateful to Satoshi Nakamoto along with Ralph Merkle and David Chaum. So I'm the author of probably the first blog post to mention Bitcoin on the internet. This was January 26, which is like 2.5 weeks after the Bitcoin blockchain was launched. And here's me blathering. You can't read this right now, but I'll post my slides so you can read it later. And the last thing it says, oh, and there's this new thing called Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto. And then Bitcoin offered decentralized money for the first time, but it didn't have what David Chaum had invented decades earlier, which was private money. And so it waited until a few years later when a whole bunch of scientists who were not me came up with a new kind of cryptography called ZK snarks. And I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute, but they're kind of zero knowledge proof. I'll tell you a little bit about zero knowledge proofs in a minute. So this new kind of cryptography got invented, and in 2013, I went to the San Jose Bitcoin conference, and there were the Bitcoin developers, there were a whole bunch of venture capitalists from Silicon Valley, and there were the scientists who were inventing these new cryptographic ideas. And they presented one of their ideas. At the time, it was called Zero Coin. And they proposed it as an upgrade to the Bitcoin protocol. And the Bitcoin developers who were there at the conference made a kind of official pronouncement from the stage, where they said, we're not going to put this Zero Coin protocol into the Bitcoin protocol right now because it's too new and untested and the transactions are way too big. So you should go forth and implement that in an altcoin first to test it out, and then we could consider adding it to Bitcoin if it works. So later that year, those scientists who had invented all that approached me and asked me to lead the project to make their invention really well implemented and sort of production ready and deployed to the internet. And at first I said no, because I thought even though I love and value privacy, I thought privacy is not enough to get something to be widely used. I thought that their science invention would always just be a niche product that was not used by like mainstream businesses and normal old everyday people. But then I slept on it, and the next day I called them back and said yes, because after I thought about it, I thought that privacy is necessary for fungibility. Fungibility is the idea that if you have, if you're selling your used bike and you're selling it for $100 and somebody has two different $100 bills, you don't care which of the two $100 bills they give you. All $100 bills are worth the same as each other as far as you're concerned. That's fungibility. Whereas if you're selling your bike and somebody offers you, they have two used laptops, and they'll give you one used laptop or the other used laptop. Well, it really depends, because every used laptop is special. So I decided to devote years of my life to the Zcash project, because I decided that with Bitcoin, it might turn out that it loses fungibility. It might turn out in the long run that every Bitcoin is unique and special, and no Bitcoin is worth exactly the same as another Bitcoin. So they're more like used laptops than like $100 bills. And if that happens, that's a real drag for commerce. So fungibility is necessary for just all mainstream, everyday business and purchasing things. And so that's when I decided to devote years of my life to that project. So it's been 2 years of work, and just about a week ago was the Genesis block for our blockchain. Oh yeah, that reminds me, when we started this, we spent a lot of time investigating how to make it a sidechain of Bitcoin, because the sidechains concept was new at about that time. It was very exciting, and one of the scientists on our team is one of the authors of the sidechains paper. And we investigated pretty thoroughly exactly what the security engineering would be necessary on our side. But then we stopped, and I decided to put it on the shelf and not do a sidechain at that time, mainly for two reasons. First, it would be a lot of work. I thought it might take like another year of effort to engineer it to be safe. And secondly, it would depend on an upgrade. We would have to wait until there was an upgrade to the Bitcoin blockchain to allow sidechains. At least that's what I thought at the time. So we decided to do the simplest thing that could get this technology out into the wild as soon as possible, and that was make a separate blockchain. Let's see. Okay, so here's Oversimplified Bitcoin. It's a spreadsheet with 3 columns: the sender address, the recipient address, and the amount transferred. And every new transaction is another row added to the spreadsheet, right? And when Bitcoin was new, some people thought that it had privacy because your email address isn't in the Bitcoin address. It doesn't have your home address or your real name or something in it. And so people thought that gave privacy. And I never thought that was good enough for privacy. It reminded me of how when the internet was new, people thought that the internet gave privacy because your IP address is just 4 numbers separated by dots, and it doesn't have your home address and your IP address. And obviously, as we now know, that's not sufficient to make your use of the internet safe and censorship resistant. But it is possible to make your use of the internet safe and censorship resistant. It just requires more technology than that. And likewise, this kind of thing isn't sufficient for privacy because you can easily start seeing patterns, like you can see that this address that received one, then sent half of it to another address. And when you get other information about people from other sources, like if you're spying on someone, or if you're a criminal who's targeting someone and you are stalking them, then you're able to put 2 and 2 together, and you learn a great deal about them from looking into the blockchain. So this isn't good enough for privacy, and it's not good enough for fungibility, in my opinion. Okay, here's Oversimplified Z Cash. So first of all, ignore this part. So first of all, we're just going to use encryption technology, which is really well understood thanks to Ralph Merkle and David Chaum and people like that breaking it free from the military in the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, we have a whole internet that depends on encryption, and we know how to encrypt things securely. So we'll just encrypt the sender's address, and we'll encrypt the recipient's address, and we'll encrypt the amount. And then the intended recipient has the decryption key, so they get to see the transaction when they look at it. But everyone else in the world doesn't get to see it. But the problem with that, the reason why Satoshi didn't do this in the first place, is that if you encrypt all these, then the miners have no way to filter out invalid transactions. So each of these transactions has to have, the sender had to have the money in the first place and hasn't double spent the money to someone else. And in Bitcoin, since the miners can see that, they can trace it back. The way you filter out invalid transactions is to trace the flow of money through the history. But you can't do that when it's encrypted. So that's why it depended on the invention of the new zero-knowledge proofs called ZK snarks. A zero-knowledge proof is a cryptographic construct. It's a big number which you can verify that nobody could have come up with this big number unless they knew the private key to spend some money, and that money had not been spent before. So the miners can all use the ZK proof to verify that the transaction is valid without learning anything about the sender or the receiver or the amount. So this is, as far as I know, the first time that you have a blockchain with its append only and its single source of truth. And you also have encryption with its privacy and the ability to reveal one row to a specific person that you want to reveal it to while concealing it from everyone else. Okay, I have no idea how much time that took, but that was 5 minutes? Oh, I have 5 more minutes. Okay, perfect, because I wanted to have 5 minutes for questions. Oh, wait, I'm not done yet. Okay, so here we are. This experiment just began. There's no telling what'll happen. But I invite everyone to cooperate with each other, because the internet revolution that started way back then, it is an incomplete revolution. People are still barriered by walls that prevent cooperation, that prevent sharing resources, that prevent people from helping each other, from engaging in contracts, from coordinating with each other, because we never got a technology that could pierce the walls that prevent cooperation, the way the internet pierced the walls that prevented communication. And so we still have a chance to keep the walls from being built again and to tear down more walls. And that's why I'm doing this, and I hope everyone will help with that project in one way or another. Okay, that's all. Now I'm ready for questions.
Muchísimas gracias, Zooko. Amazing presentation. We have time for 2 questions.
No, I can translate if you want.
Oh, okay.
We have time for 2 questions, but the good news is that during lunchtime, Zooko is going to be around in this area to answer all your questions. Okay, so only 2 questions right now.
So, question on the launch. You decided to throttle the initial blocks so there would be less Zcash at the very beginning. Why did you do that? Because wouldn't it be better to have more liquidity in the beginning, because there was a 2-year buildup and anticipation to have these coins, and there was a market before they even existed? And one quick comment, I thought about this later, but wouldn't you wanted to have more coins out there? Could you have struck a deal with the miners and exchanges not to trade it for like the first week as it's being mined, maybe even a little bit faster, and then open it for trading where there is plenty of liquidity for that trading?
So that was a question and a comment. The question was, why did we do that? Yeah, the thing we did was when we launched just a week ago, the amount of mining reward in every block is very small. And after about 30 days, it will grow to be as big as roughly similar to the mining reward in Bitcoin. And the reason we did that is we were trying to avoid insta-mining, which is the idea that you can pull the trigger of the starting gun when your friends have gotten to the starting line, but their competitors aren't ready at that moment. And then your friends can get a head start. And sometimes new coins are accused of conspiring with miners to do insta-mining. And so we figured with this idea of having a very little reward in the first blocks, then it wouldn't matter very much who was first. And also, it would reduce the pressure if something went wrong, like there was a bug or an attack, or it would reduce the pressure on other partners like exchanges and miners that wanted to start. Or if we had to say, oh geez, that didn't work, we're going to have to throw this blockchain out and create a new one, then it wouldn't be too bad if it was just the first little tiny bit. At least that was our idea. I don't know if that worked out in practice, but that was why we did it. And fortunately, we did not have to throw the blockchain away and create a new one. So that's my answer.
Okay, one more question. There.
One thing about Bitcoin is that we know that it's going to be only 21 million coins, and we see the inflation. But with this design, we don't know in the blockchain the amount of coins, and how do we know that there is not a hidden inflation, and we have to trust the creators?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to answer briefly. Maybe I'll talk about it more if you stick around after lunch. But so for starters, you can inspect the consensus rules that say how much coin gets created. And that consensus rules form the same pattern as Bitcoin does, where there's less and less coin created over time, and then it ends up at 21 million eventually. But you don't know if there are bugs that would allow more coin to be created than is supposed to. Like that happened with Bitcoin 4 years ago. There was a bug that allowed someone to create 184 billion Bitcoin in a single transaction. And it was easy for people to detect and fix that in Bitcoin because the values were visible. So this said 184 billion right here. And then we rolled back the blockchain and fixed the bug. And we can't necessarily do that in any system that has really good privacy. So this bothers me. This is the thing that I'm least comfortable about with Zcash. Any system that has both bugs and privacy is vulnerable to counterfeiting. So the thing that is probably too long of a conversation to get into right now is I want to upgrade the Zcash protocol, hopefully in next year, in 2017, to require each amount of Zcash to be revealed to the public every so often, like once a month or once a year or something, so that we can sum it up and see if it's the right amount.
Okay, thank you very much. Un gran aplauso para Zooko.
Thank you.